I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis, and this is Coffee and Wisdom. It's a humanist perspective on theological questions. This week, we are looking at those holy old saints as we consider for the month the idea of beatitude and beat attitude. Well, what's that all about? Well, as I mentioned on Tuesday, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy looks at the idea of mystical experience and says this: a purportedly super sense perceptual or subsense perceptual experience granting acquaintance of realities or states of affairs that are of a kind not accessible by way of sense perception, so somatosensory modalities, that's the body, or standard introspection. And I looked at a couple of saintly people who, one of whom was indeed a saint and the other who was burned at the stake on Tuesday. Today, I want to take another look at another British woman who was also a mystic, and that was Marjorie Kemp, 1373 to something around 1438 or so. Here she is in a carving on a pew from the contemporary time period. Now, the interesting thing about Marjorie Kemp, well, one thing, she could not read or write, but she dictated a book called The Book of Marjorie Kemp about her mystical experiences and her trials and tribulations as being a Christian woman in the Middle Ages. And it's considered the first autobiography in the English language. He had this to say: one night, as this creature lay in her bed, and that's always how describes herself. She is this creature. One night, as this creature lay in her bed with her husband, she heard a sound of melodies so sweet and delectable that she thought she had been in paradise. And therewith she started out of her bed and said, "Alas, that ever I did sin! It is full merry in heaven." So suddenly she has had a vision of heaven through music. Came before the archbishop, this is again in her biography, and fell down on her knees. The archbishop, she's going to be tried for heresy because, again, is she trying to preach? Is she trying to have these new ideas that are somehow heretical? She came before the archbishop and fell down on her knees. The archbishop saying full boisterously unto her, "Why weepest thou, woman?" She answering said, "Sir, ye shall wish someday that ye had wept as sore as I." Now, that's not what you say to the bishop when you are called forth to trial for heresy. She's saying, "I, because I have been forgiven of my sin, I recognize it. You aren't, and you haven't." Reportedly, she said that a monk at Canterbury said this of her: "I would you were enclosed in a house of stone, so no man could speak with you." And again, in Coffee and Wisdom, we've seen this several times that in previous ages, women were not supposed to talk about these religious things. Keep your mysticism to yourself. And when they didn't, they often ran into trouble, as with this monk who said, "I would you were enclosed in a house of stone, so no man could speak with you." Well, nowadays she's a little bit more respected than she was in those days. A good British oak bench marks the place where her house and her husband's house apparently was, 1373 to 1440. She's called an author, a pilgrim, and a mystic. Pilgrim because she did indeed go to the Holy Land back in those days of the Crusades. And by golly, you can a hat that says Marjorie Kemp is my patron saint. Yeah, she's not really a patron saint. Often she is treated as that because she is a woman who insisted on her own ideas and her own way of living and wrote the first autobiography in the English language. Well, that's one side of things, and the male church hierarchy is trying to avoid her as much as they can and silence her. Meister Eckhart, from 1260 to somewhere around 1328, is nowadays better known, but he didn't end well. He was a German Christian mystic. He had this to say: God is at home. It's we who have gone out for a walk. And this is going to be sort of the center of Meister Eckhart's mystical ideas, is that God is all around and is always waiting right around the corner for us. All we have to do is realize this. He has this to say: if the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough. Well, that does sound great, and it's great to put on a poster, but in the day, that was not exactly what the Roman Catholic Church was saying. He had this to say: the knower and the known are one. Simple people imagine that they should see God as if he stood there and they here. This is not so. God and I, we are one in knowledge. Oops, this too is heretical. Just as we learned on Tuesday, this Christian mystical experience is often about a realization that everything is God and God's in me and I'm in God, etc. But this was not theological practice in the day. And to say this is saying, wait, you're saying you're God? Oh my God, we will have to burn you at the stake. Meister Eckhart said this: the eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. My eye and God's eye are one eye, one seeing, one knowing, one love. Again, nowadays, the mainstream Christians would find that quite beautiful as a way of stating relationships with the divine. But in Meister Eckhart's day, heresy, heresy, heresy. He also said this: I may err, but I am not a heretic, for the first has to do with the mind, and the second with the will. And here's his argument: I am not the one who is thinking. These ideas are coming from God who is in me, and I'm not a willful heretic because I have given myself over to God. Well, sorry, the Roman Catholic authorities are not really going to agree with that. However, one of the reasons that Meister Eckhart is still around today and is probably one of the best known of the Christian mystics from this time period is his idea of monism or oneism, that there was no difference between the body and the soul, or between material reality and the spiritual world. Remember, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy says that mystical experience is experience granting acquaintance of realities or states of affairs that are of a kind not accessible by way of sense perception, somatosensory modalities, or standard introspection. Well, Meister Eckhart was tried as a heretic by Pope John the 22nd, but he died before the verdict and thus avoid being burned at the stake. But there are lots and lots of Meister Eckhart ideas today, both his writings and writings about him. The mystical thought of Meister Eckhart, the man from whom God hid nothing, Meister Eckhart, master of mystics, and the complete mystical works of Meister Eckhart. It's all out there, and lots more, even more spiritually inclined sorts of things like 15 Days of Prayer with Meister Eckhart. Yep. And Meister Eckhart's Book of Secrets. Now, he would have said there weren't any secrets involved here, but, contemporary authors can say what they like about that. So, Beatitude and Beat Attitude is what I'll be looking at in the month of December. Next week, I'm going to be looking at Outliers and Outright Liars. So, yeah, sometimes these mystical experiences that give us this attitude of beatitude can certainly be very much real for people. Other times, a little bit suspicious here. Thanks a lot for listening this week. Join me on Friday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time on Zoom. And if you'd like that link, just email me, minister@firstunitarian.org. And thank you so much for tuning in to Coffee and Wisdom.